Evelyn sat quietly beside her husband's coffin, her gloved hands folded neatly in her lap. The chapel was cold, both from the winter air seeping through stained glass and from the silence that settled like frost between the mourners. Her children stood near the doorway, their voices hushed not out of grief, but calculation. "They'll need to transfer the title before the end of the month," Thomas muttered, glancing at a man in a grey suit who stood stiffly by the exit. Mia nodded, her arms crossed her eyes, never meeting Evelyn's. "I'll speak with the county office. Probate takes time." Evelyn didn't look at them. Her gaze rested on the casket, and as she leaned forward to brush a speck of lint from its smooth surface, her silver bracelet clinked softly against the wood. It was the one Gregory had given her on their wedding day, engraved with the date, and inside a simple phrase, "If anything happens to me, leave this place." She remembered that night. His breath smelled faintly of tobacco and honeyed brandy. His voice was steady, and his eyes held something urgent beneath their warmth. She had laughed then, thinking he was being dramatic. But Gregory never said things he didn't mean. Now, years later, that promise stirred again. As the last hymn faded and the guests filed out, Evelyn remained seated. Her legs ached in the cold, but she didn't move. She watched Mia adjust her black coat with impatient fingers. Thomas glanced at his watch twice before stepping forward. "We should get you home," he said. Evelyn looked up. "Home. Our house," he clarified. "You'll stay in the downstairs room. Easier that way. No stairs." The ride was silent. Snow pressed against the windows of the black car, muffling the sound of tires over gravel. Evelyn sat still, her body swaying slightly with each turn. Across from her, Thomas stared at his phone, while Mia scrolled through photos from the funeral. At the doorstep of what was now called their home, Evelyn hesitated. Thomas opened the door without a word and led her in. The house smelled like air freshener and something synthetic, nothing like the cedar warmth of her own living room. She was shown to a room in the back. A narrow bed, a small lamp, no family photos. Just a folded blanket and the scent of lavender detergent. As she removed her coat, her hand brushed against the inner lining of her pocket. Her fingers curled around a small familiar shape, a brass key. She hadn't touched it in years. No one else knew she still had it. She said nothing. Later that evening, they gathered around the dining table. Thomas placed a file folder on the wood with the firmness of a man finalizing a deal. "This is just paperwork," he said. "If you want to stay with us, we should tidy up the estate. It's cleaner that way." Mia didn't look up from her phone. Evelyn took a sip of lukewarm tea, then set the cup down carefully. Her hands didn't tremble. She looked at her son, then her daughter. Her smile was faint, but steady. "There's no rush," she said gently. "Some things aren't ready to be divided yet." Silence followed, not out of respect, but confusion. She turned her eyes toward the fireplace. Above it hung an old family portrait. Beneath the mantel, tucked just behind the clock, was a small notch in the wood, almost invisible. A hiding place Gregory had built long ago. Outside, headlights approached slowly. Ruby, the young nurse, stepped out of the car and opened the door with quiet grace. She offered Evelyn a hand. Evelyn took it, nodding once her silver bracelet catching the light. She didn't need help walking, but it was good to know someone still reached for her. "Your room is on the ground floor next to the laundry room," Thomas said, without meeting Evelyn's eyes. The words hung in the hallway, like frost clinging to the silence between them. Evelyn nodded, saying nothing, but she noticed how quickly he turned his back, already halfway down the corridor, before she'd even taken a step. She followed slowly her eyes, catching familiar shapes, made unfamiliar. The mirror in the entryway was the same, but the frame had been painted over. The soft green rug she once chose for the foyer was gone, replaced by something stiff and beige. And on the stairway wall where her wedding photo had hung for decades was now a portrait of Thomas's family, his wife, his two sons, all smiling in matching sweaters. She stopped for a moment, staring at the blank patch where her photo used to be. The nail hole was still there. The room Thomas assigned her had no windows, just a small lamp and a view of the back fence through a narrow slit of glass. A clean set of sheets, a folded towel, and a box of tissues sat neatly on a dresser. It was tidy, but nothing belonged to her. Mia appeared in the doorway, her voice too cheerful. "We thought you'd be more comfortable down here, no stairs, easy access to the kitchen." "It's very convenient," Evelyn replied softly. Ruby visited later that afternoon, her face brightening the sterile air of the house. She brought a small tin of butter cookies and an old scarf Evelyn had left behind at the church. "This place doesn't feel like you," Ruby whispered, glancing at the bare shelves and the mismatched furniture. "It isn't," Evelyn said. After Ruby left, Evelyn wandered the house. She moved slowly more from reluctance than age. In the study, she opened a drawer and found it empty. The wooden elephant that Gregory carved was gone. In the kitchen, the tea tins had been replaced with protein supplements and green powders. When she stepped outside, the cold hit her with a dull sting. She shuffled through the backyard, following the path of stepping stones she had once laid herself. The garden was barren now. The hydrangeas had been torn out, and where the apple tree once bloomed, her apple tree only a rough stump remained, sawed close to the earth. She stood there for a long time. Thomas found her later that evening standing near the back door coat, wrapped tight hands in her pockets. He looked tired, or maybe just impatient. "You shouldn't stay out too long in this weather," he said. "Everything's taken care of now. The utilities, the taxes, even your accounts, we've transferred things over. You don't have to worry about any of it." Evelyn blinked slowly. "Even my bank account?" Thomas hesitated. "Well, yes. It just simplifies things." He smiled as if he had done her a favor. That night, Evelyn could not sleep. She lay under the stiff blankets, staring at the ceiling that held no stories, no memories. The faint hum of the washer and dryer next door filled the silence. Eventually, she rose. Her steps were slow but steady as she crossed the hall to the storage closet. Boxes were stacked along the walls, unlabeled and dusty. She reached behind an old suitcase, her fingers searching, until they found the familiar texture of aged paper. A cream-colored envelope. She took it carefully, cradling it like a secret, and returned to her room. She didn't open it, not yet. But she sat in the silence, holding it on her lap, as if it carried the weight of everything left unsaid. On the back, smudged but legible, was a postmark. Sevilla, Spain. 5 years ago. In the dim light of the storage room, Evelyn sat at the edge of a small wooden table, a knitted shawl draped around her shoulders. The house was silent, too silent, and outside the wind rattled the narrow window pane as if asking to be let in. Her fingers trembled slightly as she broke the old wax seal. The envelope, yellowed at the corners, bore a faded postmark. Andalusia, España. She slid the paper out slowly, careful not to tear the fragile edges. The scent of old ink and a trace of salt air seemed to rise from the pages, as if the letter had somehow captured the sea. Gregory's handwriting curved steadily across the cream-colored sheet. Evelyn's eyes followed each line as if tracing the path of his voice through time. My Evelyn, if you're reading this, then I am gone, and they've started to close in. I've seen it coming the way Thomas looks at me like a balance sheet, and Mia, like I'm already a memory. I couldn't stop them from becoming this way, but I could protect you. Evelyn's hand tightened around the paper. I've bought a house. Small white-walled red roof tucked above the sea in Cadiz. It's in your name alone. It's not much, but it's safe. And more importantly, no one knows. The account number is enclosed. Use it only when you're ready to stop surviving and start living again. She exhaled, long and quiet. The paper crackled as she unfolded a second sheet bank information, scrawled neatly with a note. It's modest, but enough. Rising slowly, Evelyn walked to the corner of the room where an old leather suitcase lay half buried under forgotten linens. She pulled it open, and beneath neatly folded scarves and newspaper clippings, she found what she had hidden years ago, a slim cloth-bound folder. Inside, she gently lifted a stack of documents: deeds, translations, property taxes from a Spanish notary. The name Evelyn Harper appeared over and over. She ran her fingers over the embossed stamps, the legal ink, the quiet proof that she was not as empty-handed as they believed. Her face remained still, but inside a breath of warmth stirred beneath the cold. She sat again, smoothing the letter across her lap. Gregory's words echoed in her memory, one of the last conversations they shared late one night as he lay wrapped in blankets near the fire. If I go first, he'd said, don't let yourself be imprisoned by those who share your blood, but not your heart. At the time, she'd brushed it off with a sad smile. Now she understood. The wind outside howled louder, as if carrying his voice back to her. She stood and carefully placed the folder back in its hiding place. Not yet. It wasn't time to use it, but the knowing alone was a quiet act of resistance. As she turned off the light and pulled the door to a close behind her, she whispered into the darkness. They think I have nothing left. Let's see then. Who ends up with nothing? Ruby sat at the edge of the bed, folding a soft towel with practiced ease. The muted gold of the late afternoon sun filtered through the mottled window, casting pale shapes across the worn wooden floor. Her eyes, however, drifted away from the laundry and toward Evelyn, who sat in the armchair by the dresser, turning over an old photograph. It was a faded image Evelyn in her younger years, standing beside a man with salt-streaked hair and tired eyes that still carried a spark. Behind them, a whitewashed villa perched above the sea. At the bottom, a handwritten note curled slightly from age Costa Brava, 1985. Ruby didn't speak at first. She finished folding, stacked the towel with the others, and then walked slowly to the small table near Evelyn. That's a beautiful place, Ruby said, gently nodding toward the photo. Evelyn looked up, eyes clear, but guarded. It was. The moment settled between them like dust in the slanting light. Since the letter from Spain, something in Evelyn had shifted. Her movements were still slow, but they were no longer aimless. She had begun sorting through drawers, organizing papers, gazing at things as though measuring their weight, not in pounds, but in memories. Ruby reached out and touched the edge of the photograph. I studied in Spain years ago. Granada. The mountains. The light. I still miss it. Evelyn allowed a small smile. Granada. Then you'll understand why some things stay with you. They were quiet again. Then Evelyn asked with a calmness that felt rehearsed. Ruby, if someone had a house overseas, a place no one else knew about, would you help her get there? Ruby tilted her head, slightly thoughtful. I wouldn't ask why. I'd just ask when. Evelyn blinked slowly, absorbing the words. A nurse passed the open door and glanced in. Ruby? She said, half joking, half warning, don't get too close. We're staff, not family. Ruby responded with a polite nod, but her eyes stayed on Evelyn. The nurse walked on. After a long moment, Evelyn opened the drawer of her nightstand and pulled out a worn leather box, no larger than a recipe tin. She didn't hand it over, simply let the lid creak open while Ruby looked on. Inside lay folded documents, a slim envelope, and beneath them a deed in Spanish. The text was dense and formal, but one word stood out in bold propiedad. Ruby's breath caught. Evelyn didn't explain. She only met Ruby's gaze and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was both a confirmation and a question. "Can I trust you with this?" Ruby sat down beside her, keeping her voice low. "Whatever you need, I'll help." That evening, after Ruby had gone, Evelyn took out a small notepad and began writing. She listed the property address, the bank account details, and a note at the bottom, in case I am no longer able to act. She folded the paper and placed it inside the same leather box. As the sun dipped below the trees, washing the room in a dull, amber glow, Evelyn looked at the photograph again. Her voice was barely more than a breath. "If everything goes the way they want, I won't have a choice. But if you help me, Ruby, there may still be a way." Evelyn turned the pages, slowly holding them beneath the soft yellow glow of her bedside lamp. Her fingers still graceful, despite the years traced the contours of the signature on the last page of the property transfer documents Thomas had handed her weeks ago. At first glance, it looked like hers. The loops, the slant, even the pressure matched. But the more she stared at it, the more she compared it to the signature she had carved into her mind over decades, something didn't feel right. It was close. Too close. As if someone had practiced, maybe even traced it. She remembered the moment Thomas placed the folder in front of her. She'd just returned from the hospital, disoriented, exhausted. He had spoken gently, reassuringly. "It's just paperwork to help manage things while you rest. You don't need to read everything now." That fog, both physical and emotional, had lifted now. She exhaled slowly and reached for the old leather box where she kept her husband's letters, but also a few of her own things. From the bottom, she pulled out a worn notebook with floral edges. Inside were grocery lists, recipes, and dozens of notes signed by her hand. Not a legal document, no, but something undeniably hers. Ruby entered the room without knocking, her steps soft. "Couldn't sleep?" Evelyn didn't look up. "Ruby, do you still have that scanner?" Ruby nodded and pulled a small device from her bag. She sat beside Evelyn and unfolded a towel to lay the documents flat. As the scanner hummed to life, Evelyn spoke again. "I think someone may have signed my name for me." Ruby blinked, then narrowed her eyes. "You mean Thomas?" Evelyn didn't answer, but the silence between them spoke volumes. The scan completed with a faint chime. Ruby adjusted the image on her tablet and drafted a short email. "Who are we sending this to?" "Camilla Diaz," Evelyn replied. "Lawyer in Spain." Gregory trusted her. "Got it." Ruby clicked send. They sat in silence, the ticking of the wall clock slicing the quiet into careful increments. Within half an hour, Evelyn's tablet vibrated with a response. Preliminary comparison suggests inconsistency in stroke weight and rhythm. Please provide older signature samples to confirm. If fraudulent, this could be actionable. Ruby read it aloud, then turned to Evelyn. "Do you have any older samples?" Evelyn handed over the notebook. "All of these are mine, from the last 15 years. Ruby nodded and began scanning pages one by one, each containing bits of Evelyn's handwriting, her identity etched in cursive flourishes and confident strokes. The response from Camilla came quickly this time. "Thank you. If these hold up, Evelyn, you may not just have been deceived. You may have grounds to reverse everything." Evelyn leaned back, hands folded calmly in her lap. Her gaze drifted to the photograph of Gregory on the nightstand, still in his naval uniform, still smiling as if he'd known all along this day would come. The air was quiet, save for the whisper of the humidifier and the low whir of the scan finishing its final page. If this is forged, Camilla wrote, you haven't only been tricked, you have the right to fight back. In the dim light of the storage room, Evelyn crouched beside an old wooden trunk, her breath catching in her throat as the hinges gave a soft groan. The air smelled of old paper and rusted metal, the scent of memory and time gone by. She had come searching for a misplaced sweater, and instead found a piece of her past, sealed in silence. Inside the trunk, beneath a stack of yellowing envelopes and brittle postcards, lay a thick envelope marked with her name in Gregory's familiar script. Her hand trembled as she lifted it, brushing away a fine layer of dust. She had seen this envelope before, tucked away after his funeral, but never opened it, never dared. Now she needed to know. Ruby stood quietly by the doorway, not speaking, her arms crossed in silent presence. Evelyn glanced up and offered a slight nod before turning back to the letter. The paper was dry, crackling faintly as she unfolded it. Gregory's handwriting was firm, clear, calm, like he had written it without fear, even if the contents trembled with urgency. My dear Evelyn, it began. If you are reading this, I am no longer there to protect you, not with my hands, not with my voice. So I must protect you with this. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes before she could stop them. She blinked hard and continued. I've seen how Thomas looks at the house at the land. It's not love, it's calculation. I tried to talk to him once, but he smiled like I was already gone. Her fingers clutched the edge of the envelope tighter. That is why I put the house in Spain under your name alone. I didn't tell the children. I didn't want them to see that I doubted their hearts. But I doubted them, Evelyn. I'm sorry. A pause. A long breath. He had doubted them, and in doing so had protected her in the only way he knew. Gregory had listed everything. The contact information for Camilla Diaz, the exact coordinates of the small coastal home, the savings tucked into a bank overseas, all under Evelyn's name. It's not much, the letter read, but it's yours, and it's far away from here. If things turn cold, go. Evelyn didn't realize she was crying until a drop landed on the paper. She wiped it gently and turned over the last sheet. Folded within was a photograph Gregory, slightly younger, standing in front of a white stucco house with red tiles. In his hand, he held a wooden sign. She gasped. The sign read, Para Evelyn por siempre. For Evelyn, forever. The room faded. The hum of the overhead light disappeared. All that remained was her husband's face smiling in the sun, and the truth he had hidden not to deceive her, but to protect her, even after death. She held the photo to her chest, eyes closed. For a long time, Ruby said nothing. Then finally, she walked over and knelt beside Evelyn. Are you okay? Evelyn opened her eyes. They were no longer clouded by grief. There was something clearer now, steel beneath the sadness. She reached over and took Ruby's hand, holding it gently. Do you have a passport? Sir. Ruby knocked softly on the door, then entered with measured steps, holding a thick envelope in both hands. Camilla sent this, she said, her voice quiet. Would you like to read it alone? Or should I stay? Evelyn sat upright in her armchair, her wool shawl draped loosely over her shoulders. Morning light streamed through the window, still filtered by sheer curtains, casting a golden glow that caught the envelope in Ruby's hands. For a moment, it looked like it glowed. Stay, Evelyn said gently, reaching for the envelope. She opened it with care, unfolding the documents as though they might disintegrate under rough handling. Ruby took a step back, giving space, but watched, sensing something in the air had changed. The letter from Camilla was brief, clear, surgical. The documents you provided show multiple forensic inconsistencies with your verified signature samples. Based on the legal frameworks in place, I advise pursuing a formal investigation into possible forgery. Attached is a draft of a preliminary notice that may be sent to the opposing legal counsel should you choose to proceed. Evelyn let the paper rest on her lap. Her hands didn't tremble this time. She felt awake. She had spent months, maybe years, believing her power had faded quietly with age. But now, with these typed lines on clean white paper, she saw what her husband had always trusted her mind was still sharp, her memory still true. And the law, if wielded carefully, could become an ally. She glanced at the attached draft. It was forceful, confrontational. She could already hear Thomas's voice rising in defensive panic. That wouldn't do. She placed the draft aside and took a blank sheet from the envelope. Reaching for her fountain pen, one of the few personal items she'd kept when moving into Cedar Pines, Evelyn began to write her own version. Each word was chosen with the precision of someone who understood what silence could conceal and what language could unlock. "Dear Sir," she began, "I trust this letter finds you well. I am writing not with accusations, but with questions, ones that have lingered quietly in my mind, waiting for the right time to surface." She continued phrasing carefully, deliberately. "It appears that certain documents bearing my signature may not reflect my intent. I believe it would be beneficial for us to revisit these matters, not with hostility, but with honesty. After all, we both know that clarity protects everyone involved." She paused, then added one final line. "Let us remember what may have been forgotten, the value of integrity." Evelyn signed it. Not rushed, not nervous, just firm. She folded the letter, placed it in a clean envelope, and sealed it. "Where will you send it?" Ruby asked, still standing by the window, watching her with an expression that blended pride and concern. "To the law firm Thomas uses," Evelyn replied. "They'll receive it tomorrow morning. He won't see it coming." She held the envelope for a moment before setting it down beside her tea. Her face was calm, but something behind her eyes had shifted, something like steel. Ruby stepped forward. "This feels like the start." Evelyn looked up at her, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled, not out of politeness or habit, but from a place of certainty. "They'll read it," she said softly, "but they won't understand it. Not until it's too late." "The storage unit kai naiko fai la dan sach, tai san lu tru kong?" Ruby asked softly, holding up the handwritten folder Evelyn had tucked beneath her knitting yarn. The letters, penned in delicate cursive, bore the wear of time and intention. Evelyn, sitting by the window, turned her gaze slowly toward Ruby and simply nodded. The snow had not yet melted, but the sun had finally begun to touch the pine trees with a faint gold. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, Evelyn gathered the edges of her coat and stood for the first time in days without the cane. Ever since the letter from Spain and Camilla's cautious encouragement, Evelyn had begun to reassemble herself, not into the woman she had been, but into someone more silent, more focused. Each step she took now echoed from a deeper place, not just pain, but purpose. They drove to the outskirts of town, in Ruby's second-hand Subaru heater humming radio off. The self-storage compound stood at the end of a gravel road behind a line of leafless maples. Cold metal doors gleamed dully under winter light. Unit 203. Evelyn hadn't said it aloud in years, but she remembered the number as one might remember a birth date. The manager, Mr. Langley, squinted through the glass door when he saw them. "Well, I'll be," he murmured as he stepped out, pulling on his cap. "Didn't think I'd see you again, Mrs. Whittaker." Evelyn offered him the smallest of smiles. "I didn't think I'd be back either." He opened the unit with a key she'd left in his safekeeping nearly a decade ago. The door rolled upward with a long metallic sigh. Inside, dust lay thick over trunks, boxes, a small writing desk, and a battered steamer trunk painted with the letters G and E. Evelyn stepped inside without hesitation, the cold air biting at her cheeks. She lifted the latch on the trunk first. Inside, wrapped in old linens, were folders marked with dates. Ruby watched as Evelyn removed each one with the care of someone handling memory and weapon at once. "This," Evelyn said quietly, handing over a folder, "is the original deed for the house in Costa Brava. Gregory sent it to me before things became what they are." Ruby opened it with reverence. Inside were notarized copies, a translated summary, and a letter with Gregory's unmistakable handwriting. Ruby didn't speak. She knew this moment belonged to Evelyn. From another box came a leather-bound notebook, Evelyn's own. Pages lined with neat handwriting dates spanning years, daily observations, shifts in Thomas's tone, financial documents she had been asked to sign, each noted with a date, a thought, and Evelyn's practiced signature. Ruby blinked. "Bajan chuan bi jio nai. Tu truok ka kiho fanboy." Evelyn looked up from the notebook, her eyes clear. "I didn't prepare to fight. I prepared so I wouldn't disappear." That sentence lingered in the chill air between them. It wasn't anger that held it firm, but resolve. For so long, Evelyn had been the woman in the corner, the one looked after and spoken around. This was her way of reclaiming voice, brick by silent brick. She placed the last file in a tote bag. "Let's go." Back in the car, as Ruby reversed from the lot, Evelyn reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, and dialed. "Camilla," she said calmly when the line picked up. "I'm ready. Is there a way to make sure they know I'm still in the game?" The letter on the table. Thomas entered his office with practiced efficiency, shrugging off his coat, checking his watch, and expecting silence. What he didn't expect was a single envelope, lying precisely in the center of his desk, cream-colored, handwritten, and addressed in formal cursive from E. Carter Personal. He paused. His assistant hadn't mentioned any personal correspondence. The office, sleek and cold in its orderliness, felt briefly disrupted by this one fragile object. He sat down slowly, turning the envelope over once then again. No return address, no markings of urgency. Yet something about it gripped him. Across town, Evelyn sat by her window, eyes closed, the sun tracing slow lines across her blanket. She didn't need to imagine Thomas's reaction. She had crafted the letter precisely for this moment. Not to provoke, but to seed unease. Thomas broke the seal carefully. The paper inside was thick, textured, Evelyn's signature taste. The handwriting was steady. "Dear Thomas, I trust this finds you well. I write not from a place of confrontation, but from one of recollection. When two people share a home, a legacy, and the quiet labor of decades, the meaning of ownership surpasses names on paper. It becomes something woven into memory, into gratitude, or the absence of it. I have reviewed the documents you arranged. Some signatures, as you may have noticed, carry weight beyond ink. Others, however, may lack the spirit of true consent. I do not wish to dispute in court, not yet. I prefer for now to appeal to what you once knew of fairness. Sincerely, Evelyn Carter, P.S. Not all assets were known to you. Some remain under my name. Their value lies not only in money, but in what they mean to you." He blinked. Once. Twice. Mia's voice rang from the hallway. "What's that?" Another guilt trip. She stepped in, glanced at the letter, scoffed. "Mum's silver bracelet probably means more to her than any assets." "Let it go, Thomas. She's just old." But Thomas wasn't listening. His eyes had narrowed at the postscript. It wasn't a threat. It was worse. It was a quiet declaration of leverage. He rose from his chair, abruptly pushing past Mia. "Where are you going?" she asked, frowning. He didn't answer. He picked up his phone, dialing a number from memory. His lawyer answered on the second ring. "It's Thomas," he said, keeping his voice measured. "Can you check something for me? I need to know if my mother still holds property in Spain. Anything. Even a deed from 20 years ago." As the call continued, the letter lay open on the desk behind him. The signature at the bottom, calm and unwavering, just like the woman who had written it. The family meeting. Mia flung the door open with a practiced flair, her voice clipped and sharp. "Mother Thomas wants to meet. The family needs to talk right now." Evelyn didn't look up immediately. She was folding a napkin with careful precision, her fingers steady. Only when the silence lingered did she slowly lift her gaze and nod. Very well. The meeting room at Cedar Pines was more storage closet than conference hall. The low ceiling trapped every breath, the yellow light buzzed faintly, and the 4 plastic chairs around the scuffed wooden table seemed chosen to discourage comfort or warmth. Thomas was already seated, his tablet closed, but within reach, posture rehearsed. Mia sat across from him, arms folded, irritation carved into her expression. Evelyn entered without Ruby, who lingered just outside the door, unnoticed, her body angled toward the thin crack where sound escaped. "Thank you for coming." Thomas began, his voice even too even. "We've been thinking perhaps it's time to start arranging things more clearly." "For your sake, of course," Mia chimed in. "Just so everything's in order. Peace of mind, you know. We even drafted a kind of pre-will, a gentle outline of what you might want." She slid the paper across the table. It was neatly typed with soft words like comfort, legacy, and respect, masking the obvious aim, full legal control. Evelyn didn't touch it. She merely looked at Thomas. "Are you suggesting," she said softly, "that I begin to withdraw from everything I own?" "Just to rest," Thomas hesitated. "Not exactly. But you've been under stress, and it's natural to think about simplifying." There was a silence, taut and waiting. Then Evelyn asked, "Do you two know that forging a signature is a felony?" The room fell dead quiet. Even the humming light seemed to hush. Thomas blinked. Mia fidgeted. No one spoke. Evelyn reached slowly into her bag and placed a photograph on the table, an old image of a white house nestled against a blue sea, a wooden sign above the door that read, "Para Evelyn por siempre." "My husband left this for me," she said evenly. "Still in my name. Still very much mine. I'm not dying as quickly as you hoped." Thomas stared at the photo, then at her. Mother," he stammered. What are you planning to do with it?" Evelyn didn't answer. She gathered the photograph, slid it back into her bag, and stood with quiet dignity. Outside the door, Ruby straightened her heart, thudding with something between pride and worry. The name on the deed. The night was silent, save for the hum of the small desk lamp and the faint chirp of crickets outside the window. Evelyn sat upright in bed, her tablet glowing in her lap. Her eyes, sharp beneath the thinning veil of age, moved slowly across the screen. Camilla's message blinked at the top of the inbox. She tapped it open with care. Attached, the land registry excerpt. "Your name is still on the deed." Also attached, a draft lease agreement for temporary occupancy should you choose to leave. Evelyn exhaled slowly. It wasn't just hope, it was proof. Cold, official, irrevocable proof. The house was hers. Still. Ruby sat beside her, holding a printout of the lease draft, brow furrowed in concentration. "This clause means you retain ownership, but let Camilla manage the house for a year. It's smart. Keeps your name out of anything they might sniff around." Evelyn nodded. "I want everything to look dormant until I'm already gone. They'll never see it coming." Ruby murmured, her voice tinged with admiration. Evelyn leaned forward and began typing a reply to Camilla, pausing between sentences to choose her words carefully. Thank you for protecting what Gregory left behind. I will begin preparations immediately. She hit send. Then she turned to Ruby. Can we arrange an emergency passport? Quietly, Ruby was ready. I know someone who's helped hospice patients travel before, no questions asked. We'll keep it low-key. The tablet dimmed as Evelyn set it aside. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the darkened screen, lined but not worn down. Tired, but no longer powerless. I've lived too long in the shadows, she said softly. It's time I returned to the place where I was loved. And free. Ruby smiled faintly, not pushing, only offering, go. When do we leave? Evelyn didn't answer right away. She simply looked toward the window where the moonlight filtered through the thin curtains like a beckoning road. One last walk. The hallway stretched ahead like a quiet river of memory, clean tiled and still. Evelyn walked slowly, her steps, steady heels, softly tapping against the stone floor. It was early morning, the kind of hour when even the birds hesitated to sing. The scent of disinfectant was faint, almost shy in the spring air, drifting through half-cracked windows. She wore her soft grey coat, the same one Gregory once said made her look like she owned the world. In one hand, she carried nothing. In the other, her fingers grazed the silver bracelet she never took off. Behind her, Ruby wheeled a small suitcase, nothing flashy, just practical. Her eyes scanned ahead, always half a step behind. Going somewhere, Mrs. Carter, the nurse at the front desk, asked, glancing up from her clipboard. Evelyn smiled just enough to be polite, just enough to close a door. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Outside, a taxi idled. Ruby placed the suitcase in the trunk, then helped Evelyn in. The sky was soft, with dawn streaked with pale gold and the first blush of blue. As the car pulled away, Evelyn looked back, once not at the building, but at the corridor that had held her in silence for too long. In her hand was a folded slip of paper left on her bedside table, addressed to no one in particular. I am still alive, and I am free. They didn't tell Thomas or Mia. Evelyn didn't owe them that. The airport was quiet. Ruby had checked them in the night before. No fuss, no announcements. Just boarding passes, passports, and a shared understanding. As they stepped onto the plane, the flight attendant smiled, scanning Evelyn's ticket. "And what's the purpose of your travel, ma'am?" Evelyn paused, then answered with a calm dignity that wrapped around her like a shawl. "To reclaim the house I once believed I wasn't worthy to keep." The woman blinked, nodded, and guided her down the aisle. Evelyn took her seat by the window. She didn't look back. As the cabin door sealed shut and the engine hummed to life, a breeze swept across the Spanish coastline half a world away, where a white house with a weathered sign awaited its owner. The old iron gate creaked softly as Ruby turned the key. It swung open to reveal a narrow stone path lined with sun-bleached lavender and wild rosemary. At the end of it stood a white house, small 2 stories, its walls kissed by time and salt air. Facing the endless blue of the Mediterranean, it stood like a sentinel of memory, quietly waiting. Evelyn didn't speak. She walked forward slowly, the wind brushing silver strands from her face. Her fingers slid across the gatepost, then the curve of the doorway, the chipped stucco walls, each touch deliberate, reverent. A home not just of bricks and beams, but of promises once buried and now reborn. Inside, the air was cool and dry. Dust floated in gentle currents through the shafts of sunlight that cut across the tiled floor. Books still lined the shelves, yellowed, some leaning, some closed, as if untouched since Gregory last dusted them. Behind the door hung an old robe, faded green, with the initials GC stitched at the collar. Evelyn reached out and let the fabric rest in her hand. Ruby stood nearby but said nothing. Her presence was quiet, respectful, like a shadow that knew when to step aside. In the kitchen, a tea kettle sat patiently beside the stove. Evelyn ran her palm across the worn countertop, remembering the mornings they spent here. She climbed the stairs alone. In the upstairs bedroom, behind a picture frame of the two of them in their younger years, she found a letter. If they ever forget who you are, this place will remember. The handwriting was Gregory's, soft assured, untouched by time. Evelyn sat at the edge of the bed. For a moment the years folded. She was not 74, not a widow, not a woman pushed out of her own story. She was simply Evelyn, and she was home. Outside, the sea gleamed silver under the early summer sky. She stepped onto the balcony barefoot and let the wind wrap around her. The water whispered below, steady, infinite. "I don't need to win," she said, not to Ruby, not to anyone in particular. "I just need somewhere they can't erase me." A bell rang from the lower floor. Ruby appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. Her brows were drawn tight, her voice calm. "Thomas is looking for you," she said. "He just found out. He knows this house is still in your name." Evelyn turned back to the horizon. Her gaze didn't shift. "Let him come," her silence seemed to say. The hallway felt colder now. Thomas moved slowly, his footsteps softened by the dull carpet of cedar pines. Afternoon light filtered through the window blinds, but it did little to warm the air or the silence pressing against the walls. He paused outside his mother's room, now stripped of her presence, but not her shadow. The door creaked open. Inside, the bed was neatly made. A faint scent lingered like lavender and old yarn. On the small wooden table sat a framed photograph of the family Evelyn Gregory Thomas and Mia, smiling in a distant summer. The glass was cracked, a thin web stretching from the bottom corner across Gregory's face. Thomas stepped closer. He ran his finger across the broken pane, then looked down at the soft chair by the window. Empty now. He didn't sit. A folded cardigan hung loosely over the armrest, something his mother used to knit in the evenings. He picked it up, felt its weight, then placed it back, without a word. He found the head nurse by the break room. "When did my mother leave?" he asked. The nurse raised an eyebrow. "Yesterday morning. Miss Ruby was with her, said she wouldn't be coming back." "Where did she go?" "She didn't say. Only smiled." Thomas frowned. He returned to the room, pulled out his phone, and dialed. Camilla Diaz came the voice on the other end. "This is Thomas Carter. I need to ask about I'm sorry." Camilla interrupted, her tone firm. "I can't disclose any information to you without the client's written consent. But I'm her son, and I'm her attorney." The line went dead. Back in the room, Thomas stared at the photo again. Something about the way Evelyn's eyes looked not quite into the camera, but just past it made him feel uneasy. He picked up the frame. A jagged edge of broken glass pierced the pad of his thumb. A thin line of blood appeared, but he didn't flinch. He just stared, as if the pain tethered him to something real. Behind him, Mia stood in the doorway. "She's just playing games," she said with a huff. "What can she possibly do at her age?" Thomas didn't answer. He sat in his mother's chair, the light fading around him. His hand still clutched the picture, a single drop of blood staining the frame's edge. "She can't just disappear," he whispered. But no one was there to hear. The office smelled faintly of lemon oil and old paper. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, bouncing off the whitewashed walls, and falling gently on the stack of documents laid out on the polished wooden table. Evelyn sat across from the notary, her posture straight, her expression calm. Her fingers traced the edge of the document where her name was printed in bold, Evelyn Grace Carter. For the first time in years, she didn't hesitate. Ruby sat silently beside her, not asking questions, not interrupting. She watched as Evelyn picked up the pen and signed with a slow, deliberate hand. Not just Evelyn Carter, Evelyn Grace Carter, her full name, unmarred, unstolen. The notary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, nodded approvingly. "You are now the sole unencumbered owner," she said in both English and Spanish. "The deed has been re-registered. No co-signees, no heirs listed without your consent." Evelyn smiled faintly. "That's all I wanted." She handed over another envelope this time to establish a private trust. The property would remain under her control, accessible only with her signature, and shielded from any automatic inheritance. "You understand," the Spanish attorney confirmed, "that no one, not even a direct descendant, can alter this without your explicit direction." "I do," Evelyn said. Her voice didn't shake. "I want this place to remember who I was, in case others forget." Her hand hovered over the desk for a moment, before resting again on the document. Gregory always knew it might come to this. The notary folded the papers, carefully stamped each page with precision, and slid them into a folder. "It is done," she said softly. A phone vibrated on the table, Ruby's. She glanced at the screen. "It's him," she said quietly, showing Evelyn the name Thomas. Evelyn didn't even look. "Let it ring." Ruby hesitated, then silenced the call. "I'm not doing this to punish them," Evelyn said after a pause. "I'm doing it so they can no longer write my ending." Outside the window, the sea glimmered in the distance. As they gathered their things, Ruby opened her tablet to check her email. Her eyes caught on the subject line at the top. "Mother, I'm coming." She glanced at Evelyn, who was already walking toward the door, her cane tapping softly on the tile floor. And just like her name, she was steady, impossible to erase. The sound of porcelain touching wood was soft final. Evelyn placed the blue teacup down with care. It matched the set she had brought across the ocean, the same one that once sat forgotten in the corners of a house where her name had faded. The morning breeze from the sea carried the scent of salt and rosemary. On the balcony overlooking Costa Blanca, two chairs faced each other, a small table between them, and the weight of everything unspoken. Ruby stood by the door, her eyes scanning the man now approaching. "He's here," she said simply. Evelyn nodded. "You can go. I'll be fine." Thomas stepped onto the balcony with hesitant steps, no longer the man who once commanded rooms or dictated terms. In his hand was a folded piece of cloth, something wrapped inside. He looked older, his confidence hollowed out. "Mother?" he said, voice low. "Thank you for letting me come." "I didn't," Evelyn replied softly, pouring tea into the two cups. "But you're here? So sit." He obeyed. The chair creaked beneath him. For a while they said nothing. Only the sea spoke murmuring below. Thomas placed the cloth on the table and slowly unwrapped it. Inside was an old brass key. "It's for the house in Vermont. You left it in the drawer." "I thought, if you ever wanted it again." Evelyn didn't touch it. She poured tea into his cup, the steam rising between them. "Do you want to come back into my life?" she said, not as a question. "But not because you see me, because you see what you lost." Thomas's lips parted, then closed. He had no argument. Evelyn took a sip of tea, then placed the cup down. "If you want to sit in that chair, you'll have to learn how not to take things from people who already had so little left." The key remained where he'd placed it. He reached for the teacup but hesitated. She nudged it toward him. "Drink it," Evelyn said quietly, "while it's still warm." The wind shifted. Far below, the tide rolled in. From a distance, the balcony looked serene. 2 people, 1 table, 2 cups. But only one of them sat like they belonged. Even as the steam from the last teacup curled into the morning air, what remained unspoken between Evelyn and Thomas said everything. From a forged signature to an ocean away, she reclaimed not just a home, but her name, once dismissed, now indelible. Justice did not arrive with fire or fury, but with quiet proof, enduring truth, and a locked gate no one else could enter. Justice may arrive late, but it resonates like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody. Sometimes all it takes is a signature not forged, but fearless, to remind the world she was never gone. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you resonate with this story.